This week I created a game where you make explosives go boom. The goal is to destroy entire buildings with as few explosives as possible. And guess what? It's awful. The theme for this week's Gamer Week was destruction. But hold up, I thought the whole idea of Gamer Week was to make it within a week, not 3? Look, it's fine, okay? We're just going to ignore that. At least I made a game. If you want to make this game yourself, you just need to follow 5 easy steps. Step 1, download a bunch of other people's work. Step 2, create a level. 3, make things go boom. 4, add physics. 5, check if the player has done a good job. It's that easy. After the last couple of games where I went way too overboard and way too technical, I wanted to make something fun and explodey. At the start, I had the idea of a demolition site in mind, and from there, I decided the goal should be focused on knocking over as much as possible. This later changed to knocking everything over, because I introduced explosive costs as a measure of success, and I didn't want to deal with 2 whole different types of score. It also just made the game a little harder since it sets a limit to success, just like the real world. There are only 3 types of explosive, because that's how many there were in the pack that I used. That's literally the only reason. The score was only really designed for replayability. The less powerful explosives you use, the less they cost. The less explosives you use in total, the less it also costs. Although then you run the risk of not knocking everything over, and therefore failing. Essentially, it disincentivizes you from running around and placing explosives everywhere. Although you can still do that if that's your thing. The score is all about maximizing effectiveness while still remaining 100% effective. It all starts with the trusty low poly asset pack that I've been using to save myself a bunch of effort, specifically the construction elements. I used the included sample scene to get some inspiration and went from there. The explosions are super simple. When they're detonated, they create a sphere which adds a physics force to any object it comes into contact with, including itself, which is a huge problem, but we'll get into that later. The size of the sphere, the amount of force, as well as the cost are controlled by values in a script, and this makes it super easy to adjust them for different types of explosives. The model pack has wall tiles, which meant that I could create my own buildings in whatever shape I wanted. The problem is that they're one-sided, so I had to double them up, which took way longer to get looking decent than I would have liked. I made a bunch of prefabs to make the building construction a lot easier. Honestly, with the amount of time that I spend doing this sort of thing, I ought to make a tool for it. Turns out I don't need one, because I finally decided to use ProGrids, which was way easier to use than I remember it being. Shout out to my Twitch chat for coercing me into that one. I would have liked to have added a larger multi-story building, but there's a bunch of complicated issues that arise with adding floors. Each of the floors would need to be supported by something. It would look a little weird having pillars at each corner of every floor tile. Having them hang out in mid-air also creates a bunch of problems, because then you need to decide how they're going to fall. You can't just have them become non-static when they come into contact with an explosion, because the forces applied aren't necessarily going to be realistic. For example, if an explosion comes into contact with a floor tile, but it doesn't have enough power to lift it up, the tile will just fall straight down, which will look a little funky. Another issue is that there will likely be frequent edge cases where a wall tile isn't supporting the floor anymore, and it will just hang out in midair. I definitely don't have the time to code in structural integrity within a week. I suppose a good solution would have been to make the support pillars invisible, but even then you'd still get the floating platforms. Heck, let me know in the comments what your approach to this would have been. I added the hologram shade from the previous project to help show where the explosives will be placed. The placement uses a raycast, which is a straight line that shoots out from a given point and travels for a specified distance. When the line hits something, it returns a bunch of information about that interaction. The hologram helps cover for one of the bugs that results from this raycast, which is that it returns hits with previously placed explosives explosion radiuses. Radii? Look, there are a lot of issues, especially with the physics. I tried to get through as many of these as I could with as little effort as I could. We've only got a week here, remember? I don't have time to make things work. At least properly. Let's take the barrel, which would fly insanely fast into the air when it exploded, which meant that the particle system for the explosion, yes, I stole that too, went with it, even though it was being drawn in world space. Okay, I know there are a lot of technical terms here that make no sense if you don't know anything about this. The TLDR is that the explosion makes itself go up very high, very fast, and the visual effect for the explosion goes with it. Even though it's not supposed to be connected to it, even though it is supposed to be connected to it, even though that's how it should be, and how it is supposed to work. Got it? The explosion had some problems, okay? I ended up just freezing the explosives in place when they went off. Originally, I had planned to have a check for the player being within the radius of an explosion, and if so, a little error message friend would come up and say, "Hi, you can't do that, it'll hurt." This ended up getting abstracted down to a push-handle explosive detonator. I ended up Googling if there was a proper name for that, but very quickly realized that I'm now going to be on a bunch of watch lists. Apparently, they're just called detonator boxes. I added a bunch of nature and construction models to fill out the scene and make it a little less bland, but I probably should have also added some fences. For one, it would stop you from being able to walk off the edge of the map. And secondly, it would blend the horizon line much more. One very important addition was changing all of the explosions going off at the same time to a very cool, very sexy chain reaction. I could talk about so many more of these problems that I've been having, but that's exactly what the Twitch stream is for. You get to watch me firsthand hate my life, and also contribute your ideas to the project. You might also get a say in the theme for the next week, which is frogs, of course. As always, the download link is in the description.
Whoa, hold on a second here. The download link is not in the description because you can play it in the web browser, which is great. I love it. It makes it easier for you. It makes it a lot harder for me, but at least it's more accessible now.
The next video will hopefully only be a couple days away since this one was hella late and I'm already halfway through the next week. Whoopsie. Remember to like this video if you enjoyed it. The best thing you could do if you want it to be extra wonderful, which you already are for making it this far, is to share this video with a pal who might also enjoy it. Also subscribe. Always be subscribed. Always.